If you are friends with Ethiopians, and I mean not just the ones born in the States, but also the ones from Ethiopia, and you see their wives showing respect to them and appreciating what's done for them, you're gonna look and say, wait a minute, no matter how hard I try, she don't appreciate nothing I do. So Boom Shika, Bonquisha, and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire don't want you being friends with other ADOS, man. They don't want you to be friends with black non-ADOS, man. They don't want you to be friends with Latinos. They don't want you to be friends with Arabs. Sometimes these men don't want your friendship, but these sisters don't want you to be friends with them even when they do look up to you and they like you. No, even then, no, they don't. But wait a minute. The ones that are cousins of ours, they don't want us to be friends with even the men from the Caribbean whose women are acting the same furthermucket way, not because their women spoil them, but because they will fight back if their women disrespect them. Just that is too much for them. So they want us thinking that everybody else hates us because we ADOS. And I'm going to tell you this. Rhoda Usman did not expose something wrong with her people. It's not true. The conversation between Rhoda Usman and the rest of her people sounds like what I'm going to let you hear for the next 5 seconds, starting now. That's 5 seconds. That's what it sounds like. Her people don't talk to her, and she doesn't talk to them. They're not her people anymore. Rhoda Usman is a Somali-born Carolyn Bryant. That's all. She didn't do anything she did because she's Somali. They don't think that what she did was okay. My wife doesn't know who the hell she is. Hadn't heard about it. And by the way, my wife is not here. She's not in the same city, so she's not in the same room. She doesn't know my channel's name, so I'm not getting points with her. I'm not scoring any points with her because I told you what I'm telling you. I'm telling you what I'm telling you because it's true. The Somali community didn't have anything to do with Rhoda Usman. But you know, there are some sophisticated ratchet sisters that want you and me to think this, but then they'll turn around and still try to reach out to Rhoda to encourage her in her feminism and misandry and even her alphabet business. So they want you and me to look at her and say, okay, now see, she did that because she's a tether. And all the people are tethers. But then they're going to turn around and reach out to her. No, we don't do that. That's not how this works. Rhoda Usman is just a basti niche because she's a basti niche and she ain't got no self-discipline. Sergeant Willie Pete is very good at knowing the demographic differences between different groups of people. Unfortunately, he is still subject to blackanoia. Sometimes it is true, but there are times when it's not. Somalis and Ethiopians have 3 relationships because not all of them are the same. Somalis don't really get along with Ethiopian Christians, but the kids tend to get along better if they live outside of East Africa. Somalis and Ethiopian Muslims tend to get along pretty well. They don't intermarry, but they do tend to get along okay. The third relationship is the one between the kids, as I mentioned. They all come up East African, surrounded by non-East Africans. So they tend to put these things aside when they live in a diaspora. Notice that Ethiopians and Somalis do tend to live in the same cities and in the same neighborhoods or near each other, but they're not the same people. In Atlanta, a lot of both live in the Stone Mountain area, but they're not the same people. Same thing in Washington, D.C. Well, that's more so Ethiopians. Now, in New Orleans, they're Ethiopians, but not many Somalis. In Houston, they're both. But when you find in Minnesota, you'll find both Somalis and Ethiopians, but the Somalis do outnumber the Ethiopians. But the point I'm making is that you will see a lot of many of them. That's what I'm getting at. They're not united. I know. I used to hang out with Ethiopians. I was learning their language for years. They're not united even against black Americans. Most non FBA black folks have things about which they disagree with African Americans and things about which they agree. So they don't walk around with a hatred for us or a love for us overall, either one really truly overwhelming the other one. They don't really have a hatred to overwhelm whatever love they might have. But there are times when they disagree. And when they disagree with us, it's usually the same things about which we disagree with each other. So we're not as different as what Boom Chic and Bon Quiche and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire want us to think. But why do they want us to think that we're so different? Because we are different in terms of what we tolerate from the women that come out of the same wombs as us and the women from whose wombs we come. That's where we are different. What does make us generally different is the gynocracy being amongst us and in South Africa, and that gynocracy not being amongst other groups. And when there's a gynocracy in the Caribbean, the men still fight back if they're disrespected. This tells you something. That's what they didn't want us to know about.